Hi everyone, welcome back to Radio Night Crime. Before you drift off, let me know in the comments where you're listening from. If you're enjoying the stories, don't forget to like and subscribe. Now let's relax and jump into tonight's case. Story 1. The Summer Baldwin Case, Buried in Suitcases. In the world of criminal investigations, when two or more crimes share similar characteristics, experts often link them as part of a series. It can take years to identify and apprehend serial criminals. Most criminals have experienced violence and abuse as children, and some have varying degrees of mental illness. Nevertheless, they are aware of their actions. To the outside world, these people often seem perfectly normal, so much so that those around them don't notice that they are facing a ruthless killer. Such was the case with Rosendo Rodriguez, an outwardly unassuming young man who served in the U.S. Marine Corps. Witnesses who knew him personally and testified at his trial described him as a friendly, responsible, and good-hearted man who wouldn't hurt a fly. However, it emerged that he had brutally taken the lives of two young women and disposed of their bodies in a particularly extravagant and unusual way. Looking ahead, I will say that this man was justly punished for his heinous deeds. But let's start from the beginning to understand this loud and complex case. Learn about his victims, and dive into the childhood of the criminal to understand how he turned into a monster, a naked beauty in a suitcase. This chilling tale began on September 13, 2005, in the outskirts of Lubbock, Texas. A city utility worker, performing routine duties at a local landfill, noticed an unusual object amid the typical array of colorful trash. A large black suitcase that seemed oddly intact and bulky. Curiosity piqued. He opened the suitcase, hoping perhaps to find something valuable. To his horror, the first thing he saw upon unzipping it was a woman's manicured hand. Initially, he couldn't believe it was a real human body and not a doll or mannequin. On fully opening the suitcase, he discovered the naked body of a young woman, her knees drawn up to her chest, arms crossed around her neck. The worker immediately halted the garbage truck that had brought the grisly suitcase and called the police. The landfill was quickly cordoned off, and the truck and its contents were thoroughly examined. Finding any clues in a vast city dump was nearly impossible, but the investigators hoped to at least uncover hints about the woman's identity and how she ended up there in such a state. No identification or personal items were found in the suitcase. The only distinctive feature on the body was a small tattoo on the leg with the word, Summer. The medical examiners now faced the task of determining the cause of death, while forensic experts needed to identify the victim and track down her killer. An autopsy revealed multiple injuries inflicted while the woman was alive, including signs of sexual violence. However, the cause of death was positional asphyxiation. She was still alive when placed in the suitcase, but suffocated due to the confined space. By the time her body was found, she had been deceased for approximately a day. Fingerprint analysis uploaded to the national database in the United States identified the victim as 29-year-old Summer Lee Baldwin. Who was Summer Baldwin? Summer Baldwin, born in 1976 in Washington, was known for her sweet, kind, and open nature. She was a bright student with a vibrant personality and many friends. Dreaming of an acting career, Summer had high aspirations for her life. After graduating from high school, she enrolled in community college, but university studies were difficult for her. Friends invited her to Texas for a change of scenery and opportunities. Summer moved to Lubbock with the support of her parents, hoping to start her life with a clean slate. It is unknown when Summer's life spiraled, but she gradually became addicted to alcohol and illicit drugs without seeking help from her family. Over time, her addiction worsened, leading to job loss and connections with people with criminal records. Her acting dreams were dashed, and she eventually began working as an escort to support herself. Unaware of their daughter's problems, Summer's parents thought she was leading a successful life. They were devastated when the police informed them of her tragic death in September 2005. The information they provided about Summer's friends and hangouts was limited. Notably, a few months before her death, Summer was a key witness in an important federal counterfeiting case. This suggested that her murder may have been a contract killing by a criminal gang. which drew the attention of the FBI and put the investigation under special scrutiny. The investigation and the first suspects, the first person called in for questioning by the police was Rebecca, best friend of the deceased Summer Baldwin. Rebecca shed light on Summer's occupation and mentioned several of her boyfriends, one of whom behaved aggressively, often raised his hand to her and persistently stalked her after their breakup. That man became the first suspect in the case. Summer's ex-boyfriend was detained and brought to the station the same day, but he categorically denied his involvement in the case. Moreover, he seemed genuinely surprised and upset by the news of her death. He had a solid alibi. The night before the tragedy, he had been involved in a drunken brawl in a bar and spent the night in a cell with another troublemaker. As a result, the police had to release the first and only suspect at the time. Another friend and, so to speak, colleague of the deceased provided the investigation with much more important information. According to a woman named Marjorie, she saw Summer the evening before the murder, and they even exchanged a few words. They met on September 11th in the parking lot of a convenience store. Marjorie recounted that a red van pulled up to the store, from which a young, fit man of Latino appearance got out and went inside, presumably to shop. In the meantime, Summer, seeing her friend, came out from the passenger side to greet her. She told Marjorie that he was her client, with whom she had been meeting for the second time in recent days. After the man came out of the store, he got behind the wheel and Summer hurried back into the van. Marjorie then went about her business and didn't see which direction the van drove off, nor did she know where the couple planned to have their rendezvous. She added that she had never seen the man before and assumed he was not a local. The only description she could provide was that he had very short hair, like a military man, due to the darkness outside and her inability to see him clearly. What's wrong with the suitcase? The suitcase, which became a young woman's coffin, appeared quite odd. Externally, it was smeared with garbage and waste, yet it wasn't worn out and its wheels looked new. Inside, all tags were in perfect condition and the lining seemed as if the item was brand new. Moreover, even the plastic attachment for the price tag was intact, suggesting that the person who bought the suitcase hadn't removed it. It was established that suitcases of this brand were sold in dozens of stores throughout the city, but this particular large model was available only in 2 stores. Thanks to the perfectly preserved barcode, it was discovered that a pair of identical suitcases were sold the day before the grim discovery at a Walmart store in the same area of the city where the girl was last seen alive. The first purchase was made afternoon and the second around 2 in the morning, which was quite strange and suspicious. Police officers immediately went there and requested the store's surveillance camera footage. Upon reviewing the material, they found that the first suitcase was bought by an elderly couple. These people were not initially suspicious, but they were located and they could present the suitcase and explained that they bought it for a vacation trip. The second suitcase, however, was bought by a young man of Latino appearance, athletic build, and with very short hair, like a military man's. Suspicions arose that this was the person mentioned by the witness who saw him in the company of the deceased girl in the parking lot of the supermarket. Moreover, the man also bought a pair of disposable gloves at the checkout. Further information was provided by the external surveillance cameras installed in the store's parking lot. They showed the man exiting with the suitcase in hand and loading it into a red van. Too many coincidences led the police to believe they had found their man, and all that remained was to establish his identity, locate, and bring him in for questioning. Hunt for the stranger. The man was extremely cautious, using cash instead of a card to avoid leaving any personal data. However, he didn't account for the surveillance cameras in the parking lot, which captured his vehicle's license plate number perfectly. Police quickly identified the vehicle as a rental in the name of Rosendo Rodriguez, a U.S. Marine Corps reservist. Rodriguez had no criminal record and hadn't previously come to police attention. He was in Lubbock for a few days with his unit for training. Finding Rodriguez immediately was challenging as he wasn't at the hotel where his unit stayed. However, police had his details and discovered he had withdrawn a large sum of cash from an ATM at another hotel, likely the money used to pay for the suitcase and gloves. Rodriguez hadn't stayed at the hotel where he used the ATM. Instead, someone named Thomas Rodriguez, matching Rosendo's description, had checked in on September 11th. It turned out to be the same person using a different name for unknown reasons. Luck favored the investigation. The hotel room rented by Rodriguez, which he had already checked out of, hadn't been cleaned yet, yielding crucial evidence. There were brown stains and splatters on the carpet, bed, and walls that resembled dried blood. A tag from a new suitcase was found near the bed, and the trash contained used contraceptives and disposable gloves. Forensic analysis confirmed the dried blood in the room belonged to Sommer, and DNA on the contraceptives and gloves matched both Sommer and Rodriguez. There was no doubt they had found the murderer, but by then, Rodriguez had already left the city. However, with all necessary information, tracking him down was straightforward. Rosendo Rodriguez III was born on March 26, 1980, in Wichita Falls, Texas, into a poor family of Mexican immigrants. Reports suggest that he experienced violence and harsh treatment in his early childhood. His father, described as domineering and aggressive, struggled with alcoholism and frequently abused his wife and children. During his childhood, Rosendo also displayed aggression, often getting into fights at school. However, as he grew older, he learned to control his anger. After high school, he attended Texas Tech University and moved away from his parents. Living independently, he worked various jobs, including at a pizzeria, as a courier, and as an office clerk, before deciding to serve in the U.S. Marine Corps. Colleagues in the military described Rodriguez as quiet, balanced, disciplined, and responsible. He was seen as a good friend, always ready to help, well-educated, and physically attractive, making him popular with women. Rodriguez was arrested on September 15th at his home in San Antonio. When police arrived, he was calm and seemingly unaware of the gravity of the situation. During the search, a striped shirt and shorts were found, matching the outfit he wore when purchasing the suitcase caught on surveillance footage. Additionally, his laptop and mobile phone were seized, interrogations and Rodriguez's version. For the first few weeks, Rosendo remained silent and denied involvement in Sommer Baldwin's murder. However, the evidence against him was overwhelming, so following his attorney's advice, he started giving statements with his version of events, which differed significantly from the scenario built by the forensic experts. Rodriguez began by explaining that he had accidentally booked a hotel separate from his fellow servicemen. He knew only the name of the hotel chain they were supposed to stay at, chose a hotel randomly, and only after checking in did he realize the rest were at a different location. He chose not to relocate as the military leadership indicated it wasn't necessary. He failed to explain why he registered under a different name. On the morning of September 10th, Rodriguez rented a van for convenience around the city. That evening, he claimed to have met Sommer Baldwin by chance. According to him, he saw a blonde woman sitting on a bench by the road, covering her face with her hands as if she was crying. Intrigued and concerned, he stopped to check if she was okay and needed help. They struck up a conversation. She calmed down, and then they went to his hotel room, where they talked and drank a bit, but did not become intimate. The next morning, Rosendo drove her home, but they agreed to meet in the evening. He picked her up at the same place around 9 p.m. and went to a supermarket, where Sommer saw her friend Marjorie. They then returned to the hotel, where Rodriguez said there was consensual intimacy between them. Afterward, however, Rodriguez said Sommer became aggressive and demanded money, which surprised him because he did not realize he was with a call girl. When he refused, she allegedly pulled a knife out of her purse and began threatening him. He disarmed her and punched her in the face, causing her nose to bleed. Rodriguez claims he did not intend to harm her, but acted in self-defense. Moments later, Sommer collapsed on the bed and convulsed, foaming at the mouth. He stated that he tried to help her, but refrained from mouth-to-mouth resuscitation because of the blood and foam on her face. After a minute, she stopped breathing. Realizing she was dead, he panicked. He went to the nearest store, bought a suitcase and gloves, returned to the hotel, put her body in the suitcase, and threw it in the dumpster, knowing that it would be taken to the landfill the next morning. He then checked out of the hotel, returned the rental car, and drove home to San Antonio as if nothing had happened. Inconsistencies in the suspect's story. Investigators immediately realized that Rosendo Rodriguez was lying because there were numerous inconsistencies in his story. For example, Marjorie, who met Summer in the parking lot the night of the crime, claimed that Summer told her explicitly that the man was a client of hers with whom they had previously had a paid meeting. Rodriguez claims that everything between them was consensual, but evidence on Summer's body indicates that she was taken advantage of. It is likely that their first night was indeed consensual, which is why Summer agreed to meet him again. Moreover, Rodriguez claimed that he only hit Summer in the face once to calm her down, but she died of a seizure. However, an autopsy found about 30 fresh bruises on Baldwin's head and body on the night of the crime and several stab wounds. In addition, she was alive when he packed her in the suitcase, contradicting his claim that she was already dead. Another girl in a suitcase during an investigation at Rodriguez's residence. Police seized his laptop computer. A review of his search history revealed a disturbing pattern. In the 3 days prior to his arrest, Rodriguez had been actively searching for information about a girl named Summer, paying attention to whether there was an ongoing search for her and whether her body had been found in a landfill. Interestingly, Rodriguez also frequently searched for Joanna Catherine Rogers, a 16-year-old girl from Lubbock who went missing a year and a half ago. When authorities offered Rodriguez a plea bargain in exchange for information about Joanna's fate, a deal that included a reduced sentence and avoided the death penalty, he reluctantly accepted and told his story. He met Joanna, a high school student in Lubbock, in late April 2004. After a few meetings, they went to his hotel room on May 4th. The situation turned tragic when, after an argument over money and threats of a lawsuit for rape, Rodriguez panicked and covered Joanna's mouth to silence her and inadvertently caused her death. In a desperate attempt to dispose of the body, Rodriguez put it in his own suitcase and threw it in a dumpster. This method replicates the disposal of Summer's body a year and a half later. Rodriguez initially confessed to these actions, but later recanted his testimony, claiming coercion. Realizing the need to find Joanna's body to strengthen the case, police undertook a massive search of the city dump. More than a year later, they miraculously found a suitcase containing Joanna's remains. Despite severe decomposition, DNA testing confirmed the identity of the remains. This evidence allowed authorities to charge Rodriguez as a serial offender, committing similar heinous crimes with a consistent modus operandi. Trial, verdict, and execution. Despite the overwhelming evidence and the gravity of his crimes, defendant Rosendo Rodriguez hoped to avoid the death penalty until the last moment, expecting a life sentence with the possibility of parole. However, the court decided otherwise. The decisive factor was the fact that Summer Baldwin was 3 months pregnant at the time of her tragic death. This aggravating factor was decisive, and the court found Rodriguez guilty of first-degree murder, sentencing him to death by lethal injection. Rodriguez and his lawyers filed multiple appeals, citing errors and misconduct by investigators, but all were rejected. While in prison awaiting execution, Rodriguez even maintained his own blog on criminal justice and policy issues. On March 27, 2018, nearly 10 years after being convicted of his heinous crimes, Rosendo Rodriguez was finally executed. This occurred the day after his 38th birthday. The death sentence was carried out in the Huntsville prison in Texas. This execution was the 4th in Texas and the 7th in the United States for the year 2018. Story 2. The West Family Case, the mysterious demise of a glamorous housewife. Have you ever wondered what lies beneath the facade of a seemingly perfect family? Psychologists claim that the more people try to portray an impeccable, happy, and prosperous family life, the bigger the underlying relationship issues. Typically, such individuals are deeply concerned with societal perceptions, constantly seeking approval and validation. Inside these perfect family units, resentments can accumulate over the years, often erupting in unexpected and drastic ways. The West family appeared to everyone as a strong, happy, and well-off unit, and they probably were until they weren't. The couple had been married for 14.5 years, raising a daughter together, and never once gave anyone reason to suspect any difficulties in their marriage. That was until the early morning of January 13, 2018, when 42-year-old Mrs. West was found deceased near her own home. This convoluted story raised more questions than answers. The incident seemed like both a bizarre accident and a calculated homicide. Despite the case being closed and the convicted serving their sentence, many have sided with the alleged perpetrator rather than the deceased victim. To understand why, we need to delve into the West family's history from the beginning and unravel the rumors about the double life of the late housewife that had been circulating for years. Who was Caitlin West? Caitlin Dawn West, née Martin, was born on February 15, 1975, in the quaint town of Davie, Florida. The only child of Nancy and Jonathan Martin, she grew up in a humble and modest family environment. As a child, she yearned for a younger sibling, a dream unfulfilled due to her mother's health issues. Perhaps this is why Caitlin was overly attached to dolls, treating them like living beings, singing to them and cradling them. In school, Caitlin was known for her beauty and sociability, actively participating in sports and dance. However, during her teenage years, signs of bipolar affective disorder began to emerge, characterized by depression and anxiety, alternating with periods of hyperthymia, persistently elevated mood, and motor agitation. Unfortunately, her parents didn't notice her condition until later. By then, Caitlin had turned to alcohol to manage her emotions. It was only during treatment for alcoholism that the root cause of her problems was identified. By her 20s, Caitlin overcame alcohol dependency. Managing her bipolar disorder was more challenging, necessitating several potent medications that caused complex drug interactions and side effects. Eventually, the disorder was brought under control, although she had to continue medication until her untimely death. Caitlin longed for marriage, a family, and children, but her personal life was fraught with difficulties, possibly due to her psychological disorder and alcohol issues. Yet, the attractive blonde had many admirers, being the life of the party and always enjoying the spotlight. In her youth, Caitlin aspired to model, attending castings and experimenting with different looks. She was particularly fascinated by the iconic 50s movie star and style symbol, Marilyn Monroe. She watched Monroe's films repeatedly, collected posters, and emulated her style and image. It's worth noting that Caitlin bore a certain resemblance to her idol, a fact she proudly capitalized on and cherished. Though Caitlin's dream of becoming a famous model didn't materialize, her photos were frequently published in local magazines, earning her some recognition, a fan base, and occasional recognition on the streets of her hometown. At 28, she finally met the man she would start a family with, who was William West. William Jeffrey West, known mostly by his middle name, was born in 1970 in Alabama, into a typical family. From an early age, he dreamt of a career in the military or law enforcement. A diligent student and an active sports enthusiast, he was robust, fit, and incredibly focused. In the early 1990s, William joined the U.S. military, serving initially as a military police officer. His dedication led him to become a military recruiter, responsible for enlisting individuals into the Army and Navy. Ultimately, he rose to head a recruitment division. In total, William devoted 2 decades of his life to military service. Simultaneously with his military career, William chose to pursue higher education. He earned a bachelor's degree in public relations from the University of South Carolina. He continued his studies in criminal justice and disaster and emergency management, eventually earning a master's degree. William was intelligent, composed, and goal-orientated, yet modest and somewhat introverted. He preferred quiet gatherings over loud parties and generally shunned the spotlight. He married young and was a father to 2 children, known as a devoted family man and a responsible parent. Upon retiring from the military, William became a corporal in the police department of a university town. He was entrusted with ensuring the safety of the campus community, approaching his duties with seriousness and responsibility. Although he was issued a firearm, he never had to use it throughout his career. The odd but happy couple Caitlin and Jeffrey's paths crossed in the mid-2000s. At the time, Jeffrey, still serving in the military, was married to his first wife. It seemed unlikely that the stern, quiet military man had anything in common with the flamboyant, bold, attention-loving blonde. Yet, they felt an instant mutual attraction. Their 5-year age gap, Jeffrey's existing marriage, and Caitlin's periodic struggles with alcohol, which she continually fought, were not deterrents to their relationship. Jeffrey soon filed for divorce-to-be with his new love, and in less than 5 months of meeting, they surprisingly tied the knot in a Las Vegas chapel. In 2005, the couple welcomed their only child together, a daughter named Lola. They settled in the quiet town of Calera, Alabama, Jeffrey's home state, in a custom-built cozy home. Caitlin personally designed their bedroom, adorning it with portraits of her idol, Marilyn Monroe. Neighbors spoke highly of the Wests, describing them as a happy couple, despite being complete opposites. Caitlin always strived to look stunning and attractive, with bold makeup, stylish hairdos, and Barbie-like outfits. She thrived on catching people's glances and loved compliments, always appearing cheerful and smiling. Jeffrey, in contrast, seemed overshadowed by her presence, appearing reserved, serious, and highly disciplined, a reflection of his long military career. The double life of a blonde, from homemaker to kitty cat. Despite her efforts and striking looks, Caitlin couldn't carve out a successful modeling career. After marriage and the birth of her daughter, she focused on creating a cozy home and raising her child. Yet the mundane life of a homemaker wasn't enough. She craved attention and recognition. With the rise of social media in the late 2000s, she began actively posting pictures online. Initially, these were harmless Barbie or Marilyn Monroe-themed photos, but gradually, they became more provocative and daring. Close sources say her husband not only didn't mind her new hobby, but often played the role of her personal photographer. It seemed harmless, and eventually became a lucrative venture for Caitlin through paid subscriptions. They bought a selection of ready-made seafood dishes from a popular local restaurant, a bottle of fine brandy and absinthe from the supermarket, along with aromatic candles Caitlin picked from a nearby store to set a romantic mood. Captured on surveillance cameras at each location, they appeared happy and carefree, smiling and joking, with no hint of the impending tragedy. Returning home with their purchases, the couple enjoyed their dinner and indulged in the alcoholic beverages. Caitlin, who had intermittently battled alcohol dependency, transformed under its influence into her online alter ego, Kitty Cat. She requested Jeff conduct a hot photo session, first in lingerie and then without any clothes. Jeff, not opposed, took several revealing shots, which were posted on Caitlin's private only for fans profile by around 10 p.m. However, the romantic evening that was supposed to end in a passionate night soon turned into a nightmare, leading to a tragic outcome. Body on the road early on the morning of January 13th, around 5 a.m., a young neighbor of the Wests was on her way to work. The sun hadn't risen yet, but it was light enough outside. As she passed the West's house, something caught her eye, but it took her a moment to realize what it was. Slowing down, she soon noticed an almost fully unclothed woman lying motionless on the road. She also thought she saw someone standing on the doorstep of the house, who quickly vanished into the shadows upon noticing her. During questioning, she couldn't definitively say whether this person entered the house or ran off down the street. Startled and unsure of what to do, the young woman hesitated to approach the body. She returned home, informed her parents, and they collectively called emergency services to report the grim discovery. At the operator's request, while waiting for help to arrive, they reluctantly approached the woman on the ground, recognized as Mrs. West, and checked for a pulse. Tragically, there was none. Her body was cold and already showing signs of rigor mortis. Caitlin was found face down, her body mostly on the sidewalk, wearing only a bright pink bra top. A pool of blood had formed under her head, and nearby was a bottle of absinthe. Some of its contents spilled on the road with bloodstains on the bottle. A short distance away lay her smashed smartphone. Since it was a quiet residential area, there were no other witnesses during the night. Thus, the time gap between the last sighting of the West's car around 8:30 p.m. and 5 a.m., when the neighbor discovered Caitlin's lifeless body, remains a mystery, likely witnessed only by her husband. What's Mr. West hiding? Detective Michael Melhoff, one of the first to arrive at the scene, headed to the house where the woman's body was found. A man answered the door, appearing somewhat anxious but claiming ignorance of the situation. When asked about his wife's whereabouts, he said he had just woken up and didn't find her in bed. The detective then asked him to step outside, informing him that a woman's body, identified by neighbors as Caitlin West, was found near the house. The man, throwing on a jacket, followed the officer and confirmed that the deceased was indeed his wife. However, Jeff's reaction was unusually calm. He did not rush to the body with tears or screams. When questioned about his whereabouts and activities during the night, Mr. West stated he had slept soundly as they had been drinking the previous evening. Asked what he thought had happened, he merely shrugged, suggesting it might have been an unfortunate accident. Mr. West also shared that his wife suffered from bipolar affective disorder, requiring medication, and struggled with alcohol, behaving erratically when intoxicated. He mentioned that she would sometimes jump on their backyard trampoline, occasionally missing it and injuring herself. A search of the house revealed no signs of a struggle or violence. 2 plates with leftover food, 2 glasses, and a half-empty brandy bottle were on the kitchen table. Her high heels, captured in her last pictures, lay under the table, and underwear matching the bra she was wearing when found was on the floor. However, several blood-stained napkins in the trash and an open bottle of cleaner raised questions. That day, Jeffrey was taken into custody as the main and sole suspect in the case. Chronology of events describing the last evening spent with his wife. Jeffrey noted that she drank heavily, which he greatly disliked. After the revealing photo session, he hoped they would move to the bedroom for a more intimate setting. He stepped away to shower for a few minutes and returned to find his wife still sitting at the table, drinking absinthe straight from the bottle and texting someone on her phone. Jeff was angered by this, and his requests to put away the gadget were ignored by Caitlin. He tried to snatch the phone from her hands, leading to a minor scuffle during which he accidentally elbowed his wife's face, causing a few drops of blood to appear from her nose. According to him, this was the blood the police found on the discarded napkins. Mr. West eventually took the phone from his wife and, opening the door, hurled it into the darkness. He claimed that after this, he turned around and went to bed, convinced that his spouse would soon calm down and join him. He allegedly remained unaware of how events unfolded further until the police knocked on his door, asking about Caitlin. He speculated that his wife might have gone outside to find her phone, which she rarely parted with, taking the absinthe bottle with her to finish it. He also suggested that she might have fallen, hit her head on the bottle, lost consciousness, and froze to death, or that someone might have attacked her. Mr. West couldn't explain why Mrs. West was without the bottom part of her enticing pink lingerie set, or why she went to look for her phone in just a bra without putting on any outerwear hanging near the entrance. He attributed such behavior to alcohol intoxication. Evidence and the main theory, the suspect's story, seemed suspicious and inconsistent. He claimed to be too intoxicated to remember certain details, leaving the investigation to piece together the sequence of events. The evidence was scarce, and there were no witnesses. The autopsy determined that the cause of death for the 42-year-old woman was blunt force trauma to the head, likely inflicted with the absinthe bottle found nearby, compounded by hypothermia. At the time of the incident, her blood alcohol level exceeded 2.5%, indicative of severe intoxication with impaired coordination and a high risk of losing consciousness. At first glance, everything seemed to align. Caitlin, heavily intoxicated, ventured outside, searching for her phone, taking along the unfinished bottle of absinthe. She likely lost her balance, possibly while reaching for her phone, hit her head on the bottle, lost consciousness, and died from the injury and exposure. The bottle with blood traces lay near her head, and the smartphone, the reason she left the house, was found nearby. However, the investigation found this scenario too simplistic and staged. Experts confirmed the head injury was inflicted with the bottle beside the body. However, forensic analysis suggested that if she had fallen by herself, the bottle would likely have rolled away, not remained parallel to her head. Both Caitlin's and her husband's fingerprints were found on the bottle, along with some smudged prints that couldn't be identified. The blood-stained napkins and the open bottle of household cleaner discovered in the house led investigators to a different conclusion. Their theory, later presented as the primary and only plausible one in court, suggested the couple argued over Caitlin's preoccupation with her subscribers. In a fit of anger, Jeff struck her with the bottle, causing a fatal injury. Panicking, he tried to stage an accidental fall, cleaning the blood in the house but failing to dispose of the evidence. Partially supporting this theory was the fitness app on Jeff's phone, which tracked his steps. According to the app, he was active around the house until midnight, and again early in the morning before the police arrived, contradicting his claim of being asleep. The police speculated that he was attempting to conceal evidence during these times. A third person involved? The neighbor who discovered the body recalled, during questioning, that she saw a male silhouette on the doorstep of the house, who quickly left in an unknown direction. She couldn't confidently assert whether it was Mr. West or someone else. In the dim early dawn light, she also couldn't discern whether this person entered the house or not. This information intrigued the investigators, considering the deceased's popularity online. She had many male admirers who paid to view the revealing photos of Kitty Cat. Thus, a theory emerged suggesting the existence of an obsessed follower among her subscribers. Perhaps someone sought a personal encounter with Caitlin and tracked her down, hoping for a closer acquaintance. The middle-aged homemaker did often receive messages from various men, sometimes with inappropriate proposals, but she maintained her distance. No explicit threats or harassment were found in the communications. A few particularly persistent fans, living in other states with solid alibis, were quickly ruled out as suspects. Nonetheless, footprints were found on the doorstep, not belonging to the homeowners. These prints vanished on the lawn, and their origin remained a mystery. Could Mr. West have harmed his wife? Neighbors, friends, and relatives described the couple as happy and thriving. Jeffrey was aware of his wife's unique online activities, but treated them as harmless fun. Meanwhile, their social circle was oblivious to Caitlin's alter ego, Kitty Cat, just as most of her followers had no idea of her real-life identity. When asked if he had ever been violent towards his wife, Jeffrey firmly denied it, stating he loved her too much to ever harm her. However, arguments had become a frequent occurrence in their household. A particularly telling text exchange, dated January 12th, was found on their phones, where the couple argued heatedly. Caitlin criticized Jeffrey for not matching her in vivacity and temperament, even suggesting they might be incompatible. Jeffrey remained the prime suspect, with forensic evidence and gathered details only indirectly implying his guilt. Notably, following his arrest, not only his parents, but also his daughter and in-laws rallied in his defense, firmly convinced of his innocence, and asserting he could never hurt his wife. Trial and verdict. After Jeffrey West's arrest, he was unable to afford the $500,000 bail set, which meant he had to stay in custody until his trial. This wait stretched almost 3 years. He was offered a plea deal, admitting guilt in his wife's demise in exchange for a reduced sentence. However, Jeffrey adamantly refused, maintaining his innocence. The trial, which commenced in November 2020, attracted significant media attention, in part due to Caitlin's online notoriety. This publicity put considerable pressure on the judges and jurors. By this time, the possibility of a third-party involvement in that fateful night's events was no longer considered. The prosecution argued that all evidence pointed to Mr. West. They believed, in a fit of jealousy and under the influence of alcohol, he struck his wife with a bottle, causing fatal injuries. In a panic, they suggested he staged the scene to mimic an accident, removing evidence from inside the house. Jeffrey's defense team contended that Caitlin's death was indeed accidental, citing her extremely high blood alcohol levels as a factor affecting her balance and coordination. In a heartfelt testimony, Caitlin's mother supported her son-in-law. She described her daughter as eccentric, but insisted Jeffrey loved her unconditionally and would never harm her. She also appealed to the court to consider their granddaughter Lola, who had lost her mother and stood to lose her father. On January 11, 2021, the jury returned a guilty verdict for involuntary manslaughter. Jeffrey was sentenced to the maximum of 13 years, considering time already served. Notably, had he accepted the plea deal initially offered, he might have already been free. All appeals by Jeffrey and his lawyers have, so far, been unsuccessful. Story 3. The case of Lori Vallow and Chad Daybell, doomsday spouses. Crimes motivated by religious beliefs are not uncommon in criminal practice. Statistics show that every year worldwide, over 100,000 people fall victim to religious fanatics. Often these victims do not share the fanatics' orthodox views. The case of the deranged duo, Lori Vallow and Chad Daybell, shook the world a few years ago and remains unresolved to this day. This story has been covered in media outlets across various countries, shocking and baffling people. It's a tale entwined with corrupt passion, belief in one's own exceptionalism, greed, and a complete lack of moral principles. 5 members of their own families, including 2 children, fell victim to this couple. Currently, the legal proceedings against the spouses from hell, as the press has dubbed them, are still ongoing. They face capital punishment for their heinous acts. However, they not only deny their guilt, but also seriously hope to escape punishment or receive minimal sentences. But let's start from the beginning and try to unravel this horrifying and complex story and attempt to understand how people who claim to have found God completely lost their humanity. Who is Chad Daybell and how did he become a leader of a religious movement? Chad Guy Daybell was born on August 11, 1968, in the small town of Provo, Utah, located 18 miles south of Salt Lake City. He grew up in a simple, even humble family and was a quiet, shy child. Chad was an average student in school, without any notable talents or athletic achievements, and he was self-conscious about his weight. After finishing high school, Chad, not without difficulty, enrolled at Brigham Young University, BYU, in Utah, graduating in 1992 with a bachelor's degree in journalism. During his college years, he married a modest girl named Tamara, or simply Tammy Douglas. The couple quickly had 5 children, sons Seth, Mark, and Garth, and daughters Emma and Leah. After completing his studies, the young father worked as an editor at a local daily newspaper. However, due to the family's constant financial struggles, he also worked as a night watchman at a small church and as a gravedigger at the cemetery next to it. Since Tammy did not work outside the home and focused solely on household chores and raising their children, the family barely made ends meet. At one point, Chad decided to use his journalism education to write his own religious-themed book. His first work was published in 1999 and resembled a collection of religious stories or religious-themed fantasy. Surprisingly, the book became a hit, earning him a decent amount of money. Chad immediately quit his jobs at the cemetery and the newspaper to focus on his writing career. About a year and a half later, he published a book titled 1 Foot in the Grave. This was a popular science work in which he described his experiences as a gravedigger, pondered death, the afterlife, and soul reincarnations. In 2004, Daybell founded his own book company, Spring Creek, which he used to self-publish his works. These works discussed his beliefs about the impending end of the world, Judgment Day, and more. Some say that over the years, Chad's religious beliefs became more extreme. Chad published dozens of fiction and popular science books infused with religious themes. He began to conduct podcasts, audio and video lectures aimed at helping people prepare for the second coming of Christ. Chad called himself an apocalyptic writer and claimed he could see the future, hearing voices of the deceased giving prophecies meant only for him. The story of Lori Vallow biography, early marriages, children Lori Ryan Vallow, née Cox, was born on June 26, 1973, in the picturesque city of Loma Linda, California. She grew up in a large family, alongside 2 older brothers and 3 sisters. Her parents, Denise and Barry Cox, worked tirelessly to provide for their many children. From an early age, Lori was particularly close to her brother Alex, with whom she shared a relationship. He always stood up for his little sister and protected her. Even in her school years, Lori became a true beauty, with no shortage of admirers. An attractive, charismatic blonde with a slender figure and a captivating smile, she loved being the center of attention, and was a spirited and adventurous person. In the spring of 1992, at the age of 18, Lori married her high school sweetheart Nelson Yanes, with whom she had started a relationship in her senior year. However, the young couple soon realized they had rushed into marriage and were not ready for family life. leading to the dissolution of their marriage in less than a year. They did not have any children together. In the fall of 1995, Lori remarried, this time to a man named William LaJoya. A year later, the couple had a son, Colby, but their marriage ended in 1998, just 2 years later. The boy remained in his mother's custody. In early 2001, Lori entered into her third marriage with Joseph Anthony Ryan, who officially adopted her son from her previous marriage. A year later, the couple welcomed a daughter, Tylee, but this marriage too collapsed in 2005. Notably, soon after her divorce from Joseph, an incident occurred when her ex-husband came to visit the children. He was assaulted by Lori's brother Alex, who claimed in court that he was defending his sister's honor, as Ryan had insulted her. As a result, Cox was sentenced to a fine and a short prison term. Marriage to Charles Vallow. Soon after divorcing her third husband, Lori met a man named Charles Anthony Vallow, whom she married in February 2006. He was 17 years her senior, but this significant age difference did not pose an obstacle for them. Charles had been previously married and had 2 teenage sons from his past relationships, Zachary and Nicholas. The couple initially lived in Nevada with Lori's children from her previous marriages, while Charles's sons visited during holidays or weekends. Charles owned a small business that provided a stable income to support the family. Lori, who had not pursued further education, did not work, but her husband never reproached her for it. In 2014, the couple officially adopted a young boy named Joshua Jackson, or simply JJ Vallow, who was Charles's grandnephew. JJ had autism and required expensive therapy, which his relative could provide. Towards the end of 2014, the family decided to move to the Hawaiian Islands, specifically to the island of Kauai. By this time, Colby, as well as Charles's older children, were adults living independently, so the Vallow family moved to the island as a group of 4, Lori, Charles, Tylee, and JJ. The family settled in a popular tourist area, deciding to open their own beach bar specializing in fresh juices, smoothies, refreshing drinks, and non-alcoholic cocktails. Despite all their efforts, the availability of raw materials and Charles's experience in trade, the business quickly failed due to intense competition. Around this time, Lori became interested in religious literature and was particularly drawn to a series of books titled Standing in Holy Places by the aforementioned Chad Daybell. She became so captivated by the occult writer's views and thoughts that she became almost obsessed with his ideas. She purchased all his works and read them daily. The meeting of Lori Vallow and Chad Daybell in 2016, the family was forced to leave Hawaii and return to the mainland. They settled in Arizona, and while Charles worked hard to provide for the family, his wife Lori increasingly immersed herself in religion, drifting away from reality. In October 2018, Lori and her close friend Melanie attended an event in a neighboring town called Preparing People for the Second Coming of Christ, led by Chad Daybell. As a devoted fan and follower, Lori was thrilled at the opportunity to meet him in person. Lori sat in the front row, her eyes fixed on Chad. He also noticed the attractive blonde, and after the event, when the writer and religious speaker decided to personally engage with his followers, Lori, as expected, stayed behind. She hung on his every word and asked if she could touch his hand. After doing so, Daybell looked into her eyes and said that they had been husband and wife in 7 previous reincarnations. Chad and Lori exchanged contact information and began communicating daily. A few weeks later, when Lori's husband went to Nevada for work, she invited the preacher to hold a gathering at her home. That day, about a dozen people gathered at the Vallow house discussing God, the Judgment Day, and the Second Coming. Lori and Chad also agreed to collaborate on preparing people for the dreadful judgment. The pair started conducting podcasts dedicated to this event, leading sermons and writing articles. Lori became increasingly detached from reality and her family, but Charles, unfortunately, did not immediately notice this change. He thought it was a temporary obsession and would soon wear off. By the time he realized how far things had gone, it was already too late. Soon, Lori began talking about dark spirits and zombies, telling family and friends that she was chosen by God for a special mission. Part of this mission involved destroying the spirits of darkness, demons, and all evil. Charles's attempts to bring his wife back to reality failed, And more so, she began to see him as one of the dark entities that needed to be destroyed. The tragic end of Charles Vallow. By the end of 2018, the marriage between Lori and Charles Vallow was on the brink of collapse. In February 2019, during Charles's week-long business trip, Lori changed all the locks in their shared home. Upon his return, Charles found himself locked out of his own house, noticed his personal car, the family truck missing, and discovered that a substantial amount of $35,000 had been withdrawn from his account. Charles loudly called out for his wife and tried to enter the house. Lori, in a frenzied state, rushed outside, hurling threats and curses. She screamed that her husband's soul had long died, his body possessed by a demon, repeatedly exclaiming, "I don't know who you are and what you've done with my husband." Without hesitation, Charles went to the police station and reported Lori for theft, obstruction to his home and children. He expressed concerns about her threats of physical harm against him, leading to the issuance of a protective order prohibiting Lori from approaching him. The statements Charles made that evening were recorded, a standard procedure. He spoke about his wife's excessive religious fervor, her belief in an imminent end of the world, and her tendency to classify people as either light or demonic beings. The officers, while asking clarifying questions, openly mocked him, but still issued the protective order. The very next day, Charles filed for divorce and changed the beneficiary of his $1 million life insurance policy from Lori to his mother and sister. His lawyer stated that Charles was concerned about the well-being of JJ, who required special care. He knew his mother and sister would responsibly manage the insurance payout and take care of the boy in case anything happened to him. As for Tylee, her stepfather had not legally adopted her and couldn't include the legally unrelated minor in the documents. A few months later, Mr. Vallow made the fateful mistake of revoking the protective order, hoping to reconcile with Lori and save their marriage. He began visiting his ex-wife's home, missing the children, and still hopeful of family reconciliation. On July 11, 2019, Charles was fatally shot twice in the chest when he arrived to see his children. Alex Cox, Lori's brother, called emergency services and confessed to the shooting. He claimed self-defense, alleging that Charles attacked him first with a baseball bat. In response, he drew a pistol and fired twice without aiming. The incident was witnessed by the homeowner and children. Their testimonies were somewhat consistent, and the court ruled the incident as an unintentional killing in self-defense. Notably, Alex's head injury was minor, despite Charles's background as a former baseball player capable of inflicting severe harm with a bat. The same day Charles's body was taken to the morgue, Lori threw a party at the house with music, numerous guests, and a poolside disco, right where her husband had been shot and where traces of blood were still visible. She didn't arrange for his funeral or inform anyone about the incident. Charles's sons, mother, sister, and other relatives only learned about his death a week later, when his unclaimed body was still in the morgue. A series of mysterious disappearances and fatalities. Shortly after her husband's demise, Lori sold their Arizona home and, along with her children, relocated to a town called Rexburg in Idaho, settling close to where Chad and his wife Tammy lived. Alex Cox, Lori's brother, moved with his sister and settled in the same housing complex. Lori enrolled her son in a school for children with special needs, but her 16-year-old daughter, Tylee, did not attend any educational institution. She was seldom seen outside, leading many neighbors to remain unaware of the second child's existence. Around the same time, Lori referred to her daughter as a dark entity in a phone conversation with a friend. On September 8, 2019, the children, their mother, and Uncle Alex went to Yellowstone Park, where Chad Daybell joined them. Several photographs from that trip show Tylee, but after that day, she was never seen alive again. On September 24th of the same year, Lori withdrew her son's documents from the school, claiming he would henceforth be homeschooled. The 7-year-old boy was also not seen afterward. Less than a month later, on October 19th, Chad's 49-year-old wife, Tammy, passed away suddenly. According to Chad, she had a cold with a cough and presumably died from respiratory failure in her sleep. With no signs of violence on her body, her death was ruled natural. Chad categorically refused an autopsy to definitively determine the cause, a decision that oddly raised no suspicions. Following his wife's sudden passing, Chad received approximately $500,000 in insurance payouts. 2 weeks later, Chad and Lori traveled to the Hawaiian Islands, where they officially married in a beachside ceremony. This event came as a total shock and surprise to Daybell's children, who were still mourning their mother and couldn't comprehend their father's actions. Upon returning to Arizona, the couple lived together and misled others by claiming Lori's children were with relatives, or even asserting she had no children at all. They also rented a small unit at a local storage facility, where they later moved all the belongings of the children as if they never existed in the home. Another month later, on December 12, 2019, Alex Cox died suddenly in his home. The cause of death appeared to be a heart attack, but at his sister's insistence, no autopsy was conducted, and the incident was deemed natural. Investigation, arrest, and horrific discoveries. As time passed, more people persistently questioned Lori about the whereabouts of her children. She skillfully lied to neighbors and acquaintances, but it was more complicated with relatives. Her eldest son, Colby, who had little contact with his mother after moving away, tried earnestly to reach his younger sister. Initially, Lori answered from her daughter's phone, pretending to be Tylee, but Colby soon sensed something was amiss. Meanwhile, Charles's relatives demanded access to JJ. They wanted to take the boy for holidays or weekends or simply talk to him on the phone, but Lori consistently refused or made up absurd excuses. Eventually, the boy's grandmother reported his disappearance to the police, and soon after, Colby also approached the police to find his younger sister. When law enforcement officers knocked on Lori's door and asked her to bring the children for a conversation, she lied that they were visiting relatives. This information proved false, and the police returned to her home. They gave her a week to appear at the police station with the children, but instead, she and her husband fled to Hawaii again. On February 20th, 2020, Lori was arrested on the island of Kauai and taken back to Arizona. A search was conducted in her and Chad's home, but neither the children nor any signs that they had been there were found. Now, her husband Chad, who had been defending her and insisting she had no children, was also under suspicion. It was only on June 9th that police discovered human remains buried in the backyard of the couple's home. Forensic analysis revealed that they were the bodies of the missing Tylee and her younger brother JJ. Chad was immediately detained for concealing evidence and complicity. The authorities then decided to exhume the bodies of Tammy Daybell and Alex Cox to establish the true causes of their deaths. In both cases, traces of chemicals capable of inducing heart failure were found, leading to the conclusion that these individuals did not die naturally. The trial of the spouses commenced in January 2021. They faced charges of conspiring to commit first-degree criminal acts, grand theft through deceit, and insurance fraud. Moreover, the demise of Charles Vallow was reclassified from self-defense to premeditated criminal action. Witnesses testifying in court stated that Lori referred to her children as dark entities and promised to save their souls. There were speculations that the deaths of 16-year-old Tylee and 7-year-old JJ might have had ritualistic elements. Notably, the adolescent girl's body was partially burned. Weeks before, Chad had sent Lori an email rating people, where he assigned Tylee a 2 as a dark spirit. Given the totality of the charges, both spouses faced the possibility of capital punishment. However, in May 2021, Vallow's defense team succeeded in having her declared incompetent, halting the trial process. Simultaneously, all 5 of Daybell's adult children insist on their father's innocence, believing he was framed by Lori and Alex. In 2022, after treatment in a psychiatric facility, Vallow was again deemed fit to stand trial and answer for her actions. In March 2023, the judge ruled out capital punishment as a sentence for the woman, a decision the prosecution is still attempting to contest. In July of the same year, she was to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. The trial against Chad continues, and he still faces the prospect of capital punishment. It is worth noting that this story inspired the book, When the Moon Turns to Blood, by investigative journalist Lily Sotal, as well as a 2021 television movie by Lifetime Movie Network titled Doomsday Mom. The Lori Vallow Story, starring Lauren Lee Smith. In addition, Netflix released a 3-part documentary series in 2022 called Sins of Our Mother, which includes an episode dedicated to Lori's eldest child, her son Colby. Story 4. In April 2015, the small town of Leeton in New South Wales, Australia came to a standstill. Businesses closed and the local high school suspended classes as the community was engulfed in sorrow and mourning, gathering to honor the memory of Stephanie Scott and offer condolences to her family. Over 1,000 people attended Stephanie's funeral, and a public memorial was organized for everyone to join in the communal grief. Many attendees were Stephanie's favorite color, yellow, releasing yellow balloons into the sky, symbolizing the liberation of her spirit soaring into the heavens. The gathering prayed for Stephanie's eternal rest and comfort and healing for her loved ones. The song chosen for Stephanie and her fiancé Aaron's first wedding dance played, reminding everyone of the young couple's cruelly interrupted story, filling hearts with sadness and sorrow. Stephanie Scott, only 26 years old, was kind, intelligent, and always smiling. From childhood, she was curious and active, participating in school clubs and sports. As an adult, she followed in her father Robert's footsteps as a teacher, sharing his passion for education. She taught English and drama at Leeton High School, taking great pride in her work. Stephanie and Aaron, slightly younger than her, knew each other from a young age. They spent time together, shared interests, and played sports in their hometown. They were close friends until Aaron turned 21, when their relationship blossomed into romance. In early April 2015, Stephanie and Aaron were busily preparing for their wedding, scheduled for the 11th. Stephanie, a perfectionist, had spent months meticulously planning every detail. Almost everything was ready, with arrangements set and a honeymoon booked in Tahiti. She had recently celebrated her bachelorette party. The only remaining task was to rehearse their first dance, for which they had taken many lessons. The first weekend of April reminded them that their eagerly awaited day was almost upon them. Aaron invited Stephanie to join him at a party out of town, but she declined to finish some remaining tasks, including finalizing plans for her students during her honeymoon absence. On Easter Sunday, April 5, 2015, around 11 a.m., Stephanie Scott headed to her school in Leeton, New South Wales, to hand over some work to a deputy teacher. She parked her car on the street and walked to meet a colleague who lived nearby. Together, they opened the school gates and entered. Stephanie then locked the gates behind them and, with keys in hand, proceeded to the English teacher's office. There, she sent an email to a bus company confirming transportation arrangements for her wedding guests. After working for a couple more hours, feeling joyful that all her tasks were successfully completed, Stephanie left the administrative building and walked towards the gates. Aaron, aware that Stephanie had left and would be away for a few hours, grew worried as the evening approached. He had texted her the day before and received prompt replies. However, on April 5th, he received no response from Stephanie. Returning home after 7 p.m., Aaron found that Stephanie was still not back, and her car was absent from the street. Trying to manage his anxiety, he reasoned that perhaps the stress of the upcoming wedding and leaving her students for an extended period had exhausted Stephanie, and she wanted some alone time. Yet such complete silence was out of character for her. Even amidst the excitement of wedding planning, Stephanie had been enjoying every minute, eagerly sharing details about her dress and the wedding menu. She didn't appear nervous or depressed, but rather excited and ready for her big day. With his concern growing and sleep eluding him, Aaron texted Stephanie again in the morning before calling her family. More than a day had passed since Stephanie's disappearance, and Aaron went to the Leeton police station to report his missing fiancée. The police, after inspecting the vicinity and noting Stephanie's car's disappearance, speculated that she might have left the school and been involved in an accident, or gotten stuck in a ditch or creek. Helicopters were deployed to search the area, while ground police headed straight to the last known location of Stephanie Leeton High School. Due to Easter Sunday and the limited number of people at the school, there were few witnesses, complicating the police investigation but also ruling out hundreds of potential suspects. A check of the school's alarm system in Stephanie's classroom revealed that she had deactivated it at 1:30 p.m. and reactivated it at 1:38 p.m. This provided the police with the precise time when Stephanie was nearby, but it was the only detail they could ascertain. Detectives attempted to use phone tracking, but Stephanie's mobile phone was turned off. The last activities on her bank accounts or social media were on Saturday, April 4th. Local news broadcasts began covering the story by April 7th, while hundreds in the small community eagerly sought any information about Stephanie. However, such behavior was completely uncharacteristic of Stephanie, and as each day passed with her wedding approaching, hope began to fade. Stephanie's mother, Marilyn, stated that if her daughter was not found within the next few hours, it likely meant something terrible had happened. A reporter from a local newspaper in Leeton reported that the police resumed searching the school. They spent most of the day using digital mapping technology to study the school's premises, and specifically marked the room where Stephanie worked on the day of her disappearance. A witness near Leeton High School on Easter Sunday mentioned hearing strange noises around 2 p.m., like rustling and dragging something on the ground. He recalled seeing Stephanie's car under a covered walkway, but didn't think much of it at the time. Later, her car disappeared. Another witness, a school employee, told detectives about an odd conversation he had with one of the school's cleaners the morning after Stephanie's disappearance. Amidst the rumors and anxious talk about the missing girl, the witness asked the cleaner when he last saw Stephanie, and he replied that he hadn't seen her on the day she disappeared. When asked if he thought Stephanie might have run away due to wedding stress, the man strangely and nervously laughed, which felt unsettling to the witness. Additionally, the witness noticed that the cleaner's face had scratches. The police decided to question him for additional information. This was 24-year-old Vincent Stanford. Detectives had a brief conversation with Vincent, who explained that he stopped by the school to take out the garbage bins, although he wasn't scheduled to work that day. He claimed he was there for a short time because he was in a hurry to buy groceries. Vincent asserted he didn't see Stephanie at that time and couldn't help, but wished them luck in their search. He added that he left the school after 3 p.m. to go to the store where he always shopped. The police contacted the store that Vincent claimed to visit, only to learn it was closed on the specified date. This meant Vincent had reasons to lie about the store, making him a suspect in the investigation. Investigators decided to conduct another thorough interrogation of Vincent and went to his home, where he lived with his mother. When they arrived, Vincent was not home. His mother allowed the police to search the house, where they found a set of keys on a red and white cord matching the description of Stephanie Scott's keys. While the police were bagging evidence, Vincent arrived in his car. He was immediately detained and his car was confiscated. In the back seat, they found several MDF panels, seemingly stained with blood. Police also noticed tire tracks in front of the house, not matching Vincent's vehicle. Additionally, a used condom was found on the ground, with its wrapper in the bedroom. They asked Vincent where he was on that day, and pointing to a camera on the front passenger seat, he said he was taking photos. Detectives asked for permission to view the camera, and Vincent agreed with a shrug. When the police turned on the camera, the first image they saw was a photo of a burnt woman's corpse lying in a wooded area. Vincent tried to explain it away as just shots from a movie he had filmed, thinking they were funny. However, the police realized these were actual crime scene photos, with Stephanie as the victim. Vincent Stanford, the cleaner at Leeton High School, was immediately arrested. His seized phone and laptop revealed many photos of young girls, both from Leeton High School and from the internet, as well as pictures of women he obviously stalked. This painted a grim picture of his behavior. Although Stephanie's body had not yet been found, Vincent was charged with her murder on April 9th. News of his arrest quickly spread. Vincent Stanford, 24, was detained in connection with Stephanie Scott's disappearance and presumed murder. During this time, a search team found Stephanie's car abandoned in a secluded area, 8 kilometers from where she was last seen. However, her body was still missing, and the search continued. Detectives worked to identify the location where the photos with the body were taken. On April 17th, 5 days after last seeing Stephanie, another witness came forward. He reported seeing a car near a canal around 4 p.m. on Easter Sunday. A man got out of the car and threw an object resembling a laptop into the water before driving away. The police soon retrieved the laptop from the canal bed, confirming it belonged to Stephanie. Meanwhile, divers continued to search for the slain school teacher's body in the New South Wales River area. Reporter Natalie Cooper, in a live broadcast, discussed the ongoing search for Stephanie's body. The 26-year-old school teacher's body was still missing. Police scoured fields and vineyards near where her red Mazda was found earlier in the week. Police divers also explored the canal in the area, retrieving a laptop believed to be Stephanie's. Cooper mentioned a shrine near the site visited by many that morning. The entire community was deeply saddened, regardless of personal acquaintance with Stephanie. Her family and fiancé visited the shrine the previous night, lighting candles, praying, and comforting each other in their grief. The reporter also noted that police were desperately searching for any sightings of a white vehicle believed to be owned by Vincent Stanford, the suspect in Stephanie Scott's murder. Witnesses were urged to contact the police immediately. Meanwhile, Vincent, in custody, voluntarily approached the police, requesting to speak with them. He divulged all details to the detectives, including information on where to find Stephanie's body. According to Vincent, on the day of the incident, Stephanie was in the upstairs teacher's room, working on a computer with the door to her office open. Vincent was cleaning garbage bins using a pressure vacuum and needed to take some bins upstairs. That's when he noticed Stephanie. Vincent told the detectives that he suddenly had urged to kill her and quickly went home to fetch his special kit, including handcuffs, Viagra, a knife, and cleaning supplies. He also Googled information about bride violence en route. Returning, he found Stephanie packing up to leave. When she walked past him, she looked into his eyes and smiled, wishing him a happy Easter. That's when Vincent abruptly grabbed her and dragged her into a storeroom. Detectives reminded him of the scratches on his face they noticed during their first encounter and asked about their origin. It turned out some scratches were from Stephanie's microphone and others from her nails as she defended herself while he tried to kill her. Vincent described how he grabbed Stephanie from behind, covered her mouth with his right hand, and encircled her waist with his left hand before taking her to the storeroom. He shut the door and violently threw her to the ground, hitting her from left to right. After assaulting Stephanie, Vincent used the knife to kill her. He felt compelled to do so, admitting to harboring many brutal thoughts and schemes and having previously killed others. He speculated about having some psychological issues, clarifying that he harbored no hatred towards his victims but simply enjoyed killing. Vincent then recalled feeling a hunger pang and decided to go home for a sandwich and coffee. Leaving Stephanie lying alone on the storeroom floor, he went to his car. After eating, he returned to the school, placed Stephanie's body in the trunk of her car, and drove her to his home, parking the car on the street. On Easter Monday, Vincent drove Stephanie's car with her body to a national park. There, he removed her body from the trunk and stripped it on the ground. He noticed many bruises and abrasions on Stephanie's face, including swelling on the right side and a bruise under her eye. He then decided to cover the body with branches and douse it with gasoline. He used a match to ignite the fire, which he discarded nearby. Vincent stayed briefly, taking several photos of Stephanie's body with his camera, then waited 5 minutes to ensure the fire was well lit before leaving. He abandoned Stephanie's car on a secluded country road and walked back to town. In response to detectives' questions about the brutal treatment of Stephanie, Vincent continued to deny such actions, although the officers knew it to be untrue. As a result, he faced additional charges of aggravated harm and physical injury to a woman. Investigators inquired why, in the photographs, the woman was undressed except for a bra. Vincent explained that he usually removes almost everything, leaving only the bra. He wasn't sure why he did this, possibly wanting a souvenir. He admitted taking Stephanie's bra. Regarding her earrings and wedding ring, Vincent claimed he didn't remember when he removed them from the woman, but likely threw them in a trash bin along with other items. In fact, Vincent had removed Stephanie's wedding and graduation rings and sent them to his twin brother Marcus, who lived in Adelaide. Marcus sold the rings and earrings at a jeweler's store, then destroyed Stephanie's driver's license after taking a photograph of it. A 24-year-old man was arrested at his home in the Adelaide Hills around 7 a.m. Neighbors were shocked that the next chapter in a murder case captivating the nation unfolded right on their doorstep. It was shocking and unsettling for their small street and community. Marcus, Vincent's identical twin, worked on a flower farm. His colleagues described him as very quiet and reserved, hardly interacting with them beyond work. During the trial, Marcus Stanford had no lawyer, and when the judge asked if there were any reasons he should not be sent to Leighton, he replied with a strong Dutch accent that he had never been there and did not need to go. However, the next morning, he was taken to Sydney under police escort and remained in custody. Stephanie's family was further devastated when the police announced a second arrest in Stephanie's case, Vincent's twin brother Marcus. Finally, the search for the missing Stephanie came to an end. In fact, while Vincent was still giving his confession, the police had already located Stephanie's body. A day before her wedding date, a burnt body of a woman was found in a national park 60 miles from Leighton Middle School. Detailed investigation revealed that Stephanie had been brutally beaten on the head, with a total of 40 blows causing her death. Additionally, she had been stabbed in the neck before her body was discarded and set on fire. Photographs found on Vincent's phone conclusively showed that they were of Stephanie. Vincent Stanford's guilt was undeniable, and both he and his brother Marcus were brought to trial. In court, events unfolded unexpectedly. Initially, Vincent denied his guilt, and the proceedings became uncertain. However, based on the presented evidence and police work, it was decided that the case could lead to a conviction. Psychological tests showed that Vincent was believed to be a serial killer, posing a danger. He displayed a lack of emotions and sympathy, was merciless and indifferent, often laughing and not taking the situation seriously. Several troubling moments from his biography came to light. Vincent Stanford was born in Australia, but his family moved to the Netherlands when he was 3 years old. They later returned to New South Wales. At age 7, he dreamt of committing a murder. At 12, he nearly strangled his teacher. Classmates called him a psychopath, and due to problems with violence and disobedience, he was sent to a behavior correction school. He said he could never adapt to society, and was later placed in a psychiatric center, where he was diagnosed with autism and oppositional defiant disorder. Vincent told the police that after being released, he tried to enter university or join the army, but was rejected in both cases. Therefore, he worked at several different places before getting a job as a cleaner at Leighton Middle School. His initial contract was for 5 weeks, but was then extended. While working at the school, he often hid in the women's restroom during student lunch breaks to watch them. Examining Vincent's mobile phone, detectives found he stalked girls at the school and 2 other women working in nearby shops before murdering Stephanie. Numerous photos of one young girl, about 2000, were found on his phone. He also kept diary entries about her, following her home several times and noting when she left, trying to determine who else was inside. One entry read, "She's home alone at 15:40. Enough time to abduct." He initially targeted this young girl, but when his plan failed because she left town, he turned his attention to Stephanie, who worked at the school. Upon careful examination of Vincent's car, it was found that stains on MDF panels confirmed the presence of Stephanie's DNA. Additionally, during a search inside the Stanford home, investigators found traces of Stephanie's blood on a knife, several condom packets, and her bra. After admitting guilt in selling Stephanie's rings, destroying evidence, and assisting Vincent in hiding facts, Vincent's twin brother, Marcus, was sentenced to 15 months in prison. The judge noted that Marcus' sentence did not include the possibility of early parole, as there is no such practice. Marcus was sentenced to 1 year and 3 months in prison for his involvement in Stephanie Scott's murder. The sentence was to end on September 9, 2016. Had Marcus not pleaded guilty, he would have been sentenced to 1 year and 8 months in prison. In October 2016, Marcus was released. Over 60 people signed a petition calling for an appeal of the court's decision regarding Marcus Stanford, describing it as pathetic. After his release from prison, Marcus briefly returned to Leighton, accompanied by his mother. However, the local community made it clear that his presence was unwelcome and his current whereabouts remain unknown. Marcus has apologized for his actions since his release, claiming he will cause no further trouble and admitting his actions were truly foolish. He regrets his inability to change the past. Marcus wishes to have no contact with his brother Vincent and does not seek to establish any. The twins' father, Steve, expressed confusion and fear over Vincent's crimes and has no desire to communicate with him. He rules out the possibility of meeting Vincent and wants nothing to do with him. Steve stated he cannot comprehend why Vincent committed these crimes and frankly, he does not intend to seek an answer. On the day before Stephanie's 28th birthday, Vincent Stanford was sentenced to life imprisonment for murder and 15 years for sexual violence under aggravating circumstances. Both sentences were effective from April 8, 2015. During the trial, Stephanie's mother, Marilyn, stated that Vincent was unable to cope with his own life and therefore took Stephanie's, depriving her of a chance at a happy future. They will never know the full extent of their daughter's suffering. The knowledge that she suffered is too hard to bear. Thus, the family prefers to retreat from the public eye to mourn their beautiful girl and overcome their grief. In the future, Stephanie's relatives will not respond to questions, participate in interviews or television programs. The day after the trial, the family planned to celebrate Stephanie's too short and amazing life on what would have been her 28th birthday, the second birthday they've celebrated without her. A tea party with mint cookies was scheduled for 3 p.m., and Stephanie's mother invited everyone to join. The Scott family also called for stricter screening and evaluation of school staff to prevent similar incidents in the future and reduce risks to students like those faced by Stephanie Scott. Tragically, more than a year after Stephanie's death, her father, Robert, died in a bizarre accident when a tree fell on him, leading to his death. He was buried near the same place where his daughter was interred. Having lost Stephanie, Aaron moved to Europe, hoping to heal his pain associated with New South Wales. 5 years after losing his beloved, Aaron met a new love and announced his engagement to a woman named Samantha. The community of Layton was deeply affected by the tragic story of Stephanie Scott. She will never be forgotten and her life story has been immortalized in books. Stephanie's family hopes that people will remember her and all her remarkable qualities, her passion for teaching, helping, and mentoring others. They believe Stephanie embodied all the good qualities of a human being and made a significant impact on many lives. In her memory, her loved ones encourage everyone to be kind to themselves and strive to do good in the world. Stephanie Scott's story leaves a profound mark that inspires everyone to live a life filled with caring for others. Story 5. After Victor Alexander Puturiel committed the heinous crime, he carelessly went to the home of his girlfriend's father, Raina, ostensibly to retrieve forgotten children's clothes. There he took a tablet belonging to one of the victimized girls and pawned it at a nearby pawn shop, receiving about 500 pesos. The next day, he spent the equivalent of US $10 while vacationing on the beach with his best friend, Crystal. During the outing, he confessed that he had done something bad to his lover, but without any specific details. Crystal later said that by Victor's tone, words, and expressions, she guessed the seriousness of what had happened. She even allegedly tried to visit the house, intending to see if Raina and her children were all right. However, Victor refused the visit, citing the disorder and difficult emotional atmosphere in the family. That was enough for the girl to decide that she had done the best she could in the situation. Crystal did not go to the police. Concerned neighbors contacted the police later when the smell of decomposition emanating from Raina and Victor's home became so strong that it could no longer be ignored or explained by rotting garbage or dead animals on the property. The pungent, nauseating odor was undoubtedly coming from the recently moved couple's home, where flies were congregating at the windows. Since Raina and Victor had only recently moved into the house and had not yet made friends with the neighbors, no one had their phone numbers or any other means of contacting the couple. Moreover, no one had seen Raina, Victor, or the children for several days. Due to the inability to contact the homeowners and the frightening smell, concerned neighbors called emergency services. A few hours after the call, law enforcement officers picked the door lock and entered the home. Inside, they were greeted by a truly horrifying sight: the 4 lifeless bodies of Raina and her children. Reina's daughters were found in a room next to their mother, and the son was found hanging from a rung in a closet. It's unclear how the press was immediately on the scene, but no sooner had the detectives established the identity of the man who lived with Reina and find him, as a report with shocking details of the death of the family went live on one of the major metropolitan TV channels. So Victor Alexander Putyurl, while at work in his workshop, learned that the police had broken into his house and found the bodies of 4 victims. Realizing that he would soon be detained, he sent a message to the owner of the workshop. "I cut short the life of the love of my life. She loved me with all her soul and I loved her too. A perfect love with no arguments." It's a very sad story. In messages to Miguel Urania Marancini, he passed on the contacts of Reina's relatives, asking them to pass them on to the police. He explained that he only trusted Miguel, deeply regretted what had happened, and asked him to convey to the biker club his last wish. He would like to leave as a biker with a large motorcycle escort at the funeral. The last message, after which Victor stopped replying to Miguel, read, "Now, I don't believe anyone. Everyone wants to save me, but it's not going to happen. I'm leaving this damned world. I don't care what happens. I'm leaving. See you later." Miguel Urania contacted the police, told them everything, and added that his friend had reportedly taken his own life. Law enforcement officers tracked the location of Victor's cell phone and went to the scene. Victor Alexander Putyurl did not do anything to himself. Moreover, he didn't even think about it. He didn't even feel remorse or guilt for what had happened. The man knew he would be caught, and in a sense planned his arrest to make it as safe for himself as possible. Gathering his backpack of essentials, he headed to a small park not far from the workshop. For a while, he sat pensively on the sidewalk next to the park. A passerby approached him and asked if he needed help. Shaking his head from side to side, he replied that he was fine, stood up, walked into the park, and lay down on the grass. In this position, looking serenely at the sky and putting his hands behind his head, Victor lay there for almost an hour. Around 8 a.m., a national police van arrived. The man did not move or resist arrest. The arrest took less than 5 minutes. Reina Isabel Encarnacion was born in 1985 in the Dominican Republic. A few years after Reina was born, her parents decided to separate. Her father left the family, but continued to support his ex-wife and daughter. Later, Reina's mother met another man, and the girl had a stepfather, who essentially became another father to her. Reina developed a great bond with her mother's new husband and maintained a warm relationship with her biological father. Both men treated her with warmth and care. Reina grew up to be an inquisitive and active child. She loved learning and enjoyed going to school. Her father's house was nearby, and she often saw him. It seemed that this intelligent and cheerful girl had a great future ahead of her. After successfully completing school, Reina entered university and began her higher education in commercial law. At the same time, she applied to the Autonomous University of Santo Domingo with the dream of obtaining a second degree in medicine. But she was not accepted and had to postpone her dream until the following year. When Reina turned 20, she met a man much older than herself, Daniel Bowden. Despite the significant age difference, a romantic spark ignited between them. A few months into their relationship, Reina became pregnant and the couple married. As a result of this union, they had 3 children, Daniela, Ericmina, and Angela. Reina had to give up her dream of getting a second higher education. At first, Reina and Daniel's marriage seemed ideal, but over time, the age difference began to affect their relationship, leading to frequent quarrels. Daniel realized that the constant conflicts are harmful to their children, and after 8 years of life together, the couple decided to separate. A long legal battle ensued, primarily concerning child custody. Unable to reach an agreement on their own, family court specialists intervened. They decided to conduct a psychological evaluation to help the children formulate who they wanted to live with. The experts concluded that the father should be the guardian, taking into account his age, financial situation, and the opinion of older children. However, the judge making the final decision ignored the experts' recommendations and awarded custody of the older children to Reina. The youngest daughter, Angela, was to be raised in the custody of one of Daniel's sisters. Tragically, this decision deprived the children of not only a future, but a life. The years that followed showed that the judge should have heeded the advice of experts. It turned out that Raina's struggle was more about alimony than the children. After gaining custody of the older children, she immediately handed them over to her mother, believing it to be the best solution for everyone. She then initiated a new legal dispute over alimony payments. Raina claimed that her ex-husband had not paid her any of the court-ordered amount. Daniel countered that he had fulfilled all obligations, although he couldn't provide proof, claiming the payments were made in cash. The legal battle lasted several months and concluded in the mother's favor, with Daniel making another alimony payment. Significantly, during the second legal proceeding, Raina's own mother testified in defense of her former son-in-law, Daniel. She believed that Daniel was an excellent and responsible father who deserved better treatment. She emphasized that he and her daughter had shared 8 beautiful years together, with Daniel being a good, responsible husband and father. It's not to say that Raina neglected her children entirely. She visited them almost daily at their grandmother's place and regularly took them to her home on weekends. The rest of the time, she lived life to the fullest, making up for lost youth. At one of the parties, she met her new love, Victor Alexander Puturial. It's hard to imagine what attracted the young woman to Victor. He was 2 years younger than Raina. On one hand, Victor made a striking first impression. A mystically minded young man with long black hair and glowing white contact lenses, a biker and metalhead. On the other hand, he was a dirty, unkempt, introverted, and insecure guy. These peculiarities didn't deter the girl. Soon, the love-struck couple moved in together. Raina's mother accepted Victor. The young man won her over with his affability and numerous tales of the difficult life situations he had endured. He often and in detail spoke about his challenging childhood when his mother left him under the care of a strict and harsh father. Unfortunately, manipulating the maternal instinct did not alert the children's grandmother. On the contrary, it endeared her to the manipulator. Victor was born in 1987. He indeed spent his early years with his father. It is unknown whether he was cruel to him. Victor learned to adapt to circumstances, even if they were uncomfortable for him, and no one in his surroundings saw anything odd about him except for his appearance. From childhood, Victor never got into conflicts. He excelled in school and graduated with honors. He couldn't attend university only because his parents couldn't afford it. Therefore, he started looking for work and soon got an internship in a motorcycle repair shop. Since then, motorcycles became his passion. Over time, Victor acquired a Harley-Davidson motorcycle and joined the subculture of motorcycle enthusiasts and fans. A quiet, law-abiding citizen with no history of even a parking ticket, Victor nevertheless scared those around him. Always in black clothes, with eye makeup, painted nails, and often white contact lenses. Very rarely did his control slip, revealing the lurking monster. After the incident, a neighbor recalled how he accidentally saw Victor Powderall when he caught a neighbor's chicken, slit its throat, and drank the hot blood directly from the bird's wound. Raina and Victor took the children on weekends and sometimes on weekdays. The grandparents were very happy to have a break from their 3 noisy and active grandchildren. They saw that their daughter's new partner was kind and attentive to the children. Raina never complained to her parents about Victor, and in general, they never seemed to quarrel, which pleased her parents very much. The only shadow over this idyllic scene was a disturbing piece of information they had accidentally learned. Victor had a 10-year-old daughter whose biological mother had obtained a restraining order forbidding Victor from approaching the girl. Raina's parents couldn't understand why the mother would do such a thing. Raina's stepfather even followed Victor around a few times but found nothing unusual or incriminating. The young man did not drink alcohol, did not use illegal substances, and was either at home or at work repairing motorcycles. He was never rude to the children, even when left alone with them. In other words, despite suspicions, he seemed like a normal person. Raina's parents wrote off the restraining order as her birth mother's eccentricity and settled down. The tale ended when the aunt, who had been caring for the youngest daughter, Angela, informed Raina that she could no longer care for the girl. Around the same time, Raina's mother began having health problems, and the grandchildren had to move from their grandmother's house to Reina and Victor's. Suddenly, all 5 of them found themselves in a small apartment. However, the circumstances were very favorable. Reina was offered a new job with a higher salary. The reunited family moved into a spacious rented house with several separate rooms. A happy family life began. A spacious house, loving partners, children with their mother. Isn't that a sign that everything was going well? Perhaps it was. But soon Reina lost her job and the family faced some financial difficulties. According to Victor's mother, she even had to provide financial assistance to the young couple, as there was not enough money even for food, not to mention rent. Meanwhile, Reina's mother never heard about the difficulties her daughter was facing. Reina only occasionally brought the children to her mother's house, asking her grandmother to feed them well, which her grandmother was happy to do. In addition to the financial problems, something strange and clearly unhealthy began to happen in the couple. Reina had never complained to anyone about anything, but their relationship was far from normal. Shortly before the terrible events, Victor appeared on the street with short-cropped hair. It turned out that the couple had had a serious fight the night before, and Reina had cut off his long black hair as revenge while he slept. Additionally, Victor admitted that Reina threatened to leave him with the kids if he didn't find a well-paying job within a month. On Saturday, February 3, 2018, Reina went to her mother's house to pick up the children, who had been staying with their grandmother since Thursday. Reina's mother did not notice anything unusual in her daughter's behavior. On the contrary, she was sociable and in a normal mood. They had time to chat over a cup of tea while the children packed their things. The next day, early Sunday morning, February 4th, the girl and her mother had a brief telephone conversation during which they discussed current affairs and agreed to call each other later. Reina never contacted again. After numerous attempts to call and many text messages sent to her daughter and grandchildren, the woman called Victor, but he didn't pick up either. So, the silence and ignoring of calls stretched for several days. Finally, on Wednesday, February 7th, Victor answered. He assured that everything was in order and promised that Reina would call back soon and explain everything in detail. He asked her not to worry and to wait for the call. The daughter never called back. It became clear to the parents that something terrible had happened. A day later, they received a call from law enforcement officers, from whom Reina's parents learned the horrifying details of what had happened. After the arrest, Victor Alexander immediately began to testify. He did not hide anything and did not count on leniency. According to him, he really wanted to end his life, but then changed his mind, believing that he should pay for what he had done. Thanks to the detailed testimony, it was possible to almost completely restore the chronology of events. On the morning of Sunday, February 4th, the roommates had another big fight in their shared bedroom. Victor struck Reina several blows on her neck, chest, and stomach, as a result of which she died. He then left her body locked in the room and sent Daniela, Reina's oldest child, to the store, asking her to buy him a pack of cigarettes. While the girl was gone, Victor went to the children's room and strangled Reina's daughter with a necktie while she slept. When Daniela returned from the store, he did the same thing to her as he had done to her sister. He then moved the children's bodies to the bedroom he shared with Reina. At that time, young Aramin was playing quietly in the small courtyard behind the house. Victor approached the boy and explained that his older sister had gone to the store and was too late, so he would take him to his aunt's house and then go look for Daniela. Aramin obediently went with Victor to the house of his aunt, Johanna Mendoza Qualo. Leaving the boy behind, the man returned to the house, intending to hide the consequences of his actions. It seems that it was only when he returned to the house that he realized that it was impossible to hide the truth and it would inevitably be revealed. A few hours later, he returned for the boy and informed his aunt that Daniela had been found and it was time to go home. At home, Victor ended Aramin's life by hanging him from a rung inside a closet. The man claimed that he committed this crime because of the difficult financial situation they were all in, which he was psychologically unable to cope with. Victor's acquaintances confirmed that he had recently complained about family disagreements over money. Victor's mother told investigators that it was financial difficulties that had driven her son to a state of despair and forced him to commit such a grave act. The couple was already in a critical state, and their situation was exacerbated over the weekend when they did not receive their expected paycheck. I believe that it was this situation of my son, who was still a young man, being demanded money from a woman and her children, that pushed him to the edge, said Mrs. Joanna Mendoza, aunt of the accused. However, the extreme brutality of the crime was not consistent with a state of mental illness. The preliminary autopsy report clarified the situation, showing that all the female victims were not only deprived of their lives, but also abused. An investigation by the public prosecutor's office revealed that the victim, Reina Isabel Encarnacion, had repeatedly expressed concerns in correspondence with the accused on WhatsApp about the inappropriateness of intimate acts towards Angela while she was asleep. In one of the latest messages, the woman threatened her cohabitant that she would go to the police. Reina's mother told the police that the detained young man had always treated the three girls very well, but he had a special relationship with Angela. He carried her in his arms, often put her on his lap, hugged and kissed her. He even came up with a special nickname for her, Señorita. Investigators assumed that Victor had ended the lives of the family members not because of financial problems, but to cover up the wrongful acts committed against Angela. Forensic results confirmed that Reina, as well as the two girls, had been wrongfully abused. However, the experts could not determine whether the wrongful acts were committed before or after taking their lives, as the bodies were found at a late stage of decomposition. A psychiatric examination showed that Victor suffers from antisocial personality disorder, meaning he lacks both guilt and conscience. The heinous crime outraged and shocked the entire Dominican society. The trial began in January 2019 and was completed in just 2 days. Testimony was given by experts and forensic experts, investigators, and various witnesses. Especially a lot of information was obtained from Victor's friends. For example, Crystal, the defendant's best friend, said that on the day of his arrest, he gave her all of his social media passwords and his mother's phone number. According to her, it seemed that the young man was planning to leave his life. Another friend of the young man said that Victor confessed the crime to him in detail a few days before his arrest, but the confession was so horrifying that the friend took it as a joke. In general, everyone who had ever seen or met the accused was shocked by his act. Neighbors, teachers, co-workers, they always saw him as a quiet guy with a distinctive appearance and nothing more. He didn't seem confrontational, wasn't known as a brawler, and, according to them, never spoke ill of others. He just wasn't very social. Victor's only diagnosis as a child was attention deficit disorder, but according to his mother, the condition didn't cause any problems for the family or himself. Some 18 witnesses, including 2 forensic experts, testified at the trial. The latter provided such shocking details that even Victor's mother asked for the full weight of the law to fall on her son. Justice must be served. He must pay for everything he has done, she said in court. She begged Reina's family to forgive her for having such a son and shared their grief. Victor Alexander Putral pleaded guilty in court to taking the lives of Reina Isabel Encarnacion and her 3 children. He also apologized to the victim's family and the public for the crime. I accept the facts, and not everything that was said happened exactly as described. I realize that I cannot turn back time and bring back the lives I took. I apologize to the community and all family members for what happened. I contributed to my arrest because I realized that by ending my life, I would not be able to pay for my actions, Victor Putral calmly stated. The man received the most severe sentence then available in the Dominican Republic's judicial system, 30 years. At the time the sentence was pronounced, he was just 30 years old, meaning that under fortunate circumstances, he could leave prison and live the rest of his life in freedom. This possibility seriously urged the National Congress to expedite updates to the criminal code. The country's code, adopted in 1844, does not include cumulative punishment for multiple crimes. Had the updated criminal code, currently under consideration in the National Congress, been in effect, Victor Alexander would have faced a sentence of up to 60 years for his crime. The life-taking of Reina and her children drew attention to the urgency of replacing the code as soon as possible. Nevertheless, it can be said that justice prevailed. The perpetrator received the maximum sentence. At least Reina's mother, speaking on various television programs, stated that she was satisfied with the outcome of the case. The biological father of the 3 children who were taken cannot yet accept what happened. He stated that the tragedy with his children would not have occurred if the judge had listened to the experts and granted him custody. Story 6. The case of Michelle O'Keefe, who killed the aspiring actress. The judicial system, unfortunately, is not perfect, even in the most developed and democratic countries. Innocent people sometimes end up serving time for crimes they did not commit, a result of investigative errors or other mishaps. Such injustices usually come to light only when the real culprit is found and proven guilty. But what happens when someone convicted of murder is exonerated years later while the real perpetrator remains unpunished because crucial evidence was lost by the police at the time? The case of young American Michelle O'Keefe, killed under mysterious circumstances in the early 2000s, shook the nation. The investigation lasted several years until the main, and essentially the only, suspect was imprisoned for a significant term. It seemed the case was closed, but after 11 years in prison, the convicted person's innocence was proven. Simultaneously, new details emerged, and another suspect appeared, likely the real murderer. However, more than 2 decades since the student's murder, her parents have become disillusioned with justice, losing hope that the person who took their daughter's life will face fair punishment. Let's delve into this story from the beginning and try to understand where the investigation went wrong and whether these errors could have been avoided. Who was Michelle O'Keefe? Michelle Teresa O'Keefe was born on October 11, 1981, in the quiet town of Hanford, California. The eldest of 2 children born to Patricia and Michael O'Keefe, Michelle grew up alongside her younger brother, Jason. The O'Keefes were a well-off family, owning a profitable local store. Her parents were committed to ensuring their children received a quality education and could fully realize their talents and potential. Michelle was an exemplary student, excelled in sports and ballroom dancing, and was known for her attractive and artistic demeanor. She dreamed of becoming a famous actress, appearing in films, and conquering Hollywood. She possessed the talent, ambition, and attributes necessary for such a feat. After graduating high school with honors, Michelle easily gained admission to one of California's prestigious colleges. She continued her passion for dancing and took evening acting classes. Michelle actively participated in various events, appeared in commercials, and was often seen as an extra in movie and music video shoots. On her 18th birthday, her loving parents gifted her a luxurious blue Ford Mustang with a new edge design concept. Michelle had always dreamt of owning this car and was overjoyed to receive it as a present. Unfortunately, it was this striking vehicle that likely drew the attention of her killer, leading to the tragic demise of the young Michelle. The last shoot on February 22, 2000, 18-year-old Michelle O'Keefe and her close friend Jennifer Peterson, also an aspiring actress, headed to Palmdale, a scenic town in Los Angeles County, for a video shoot. They were to appear in the latest music video by the popular rock musician Robert James Ritchie, better known by his stage name, Kid Rock. Jennifer and Michelle were extras, dancing in revealing outfits for the video. The shoot consumed nearly the entire day, so by the time they returned to their cars parked at a nearby amusement park, it had almost darkened. Jennifer planned to go home, but Michelle had acting classes that evening. The friends chatted in the parking lot for a few minutes before parting ways. Jennifer walked to her car, while Michelle decided to stay behind to change into her regular clothes. She felt it inappropriate to attend her acting classes in the same outfit she wore for the video shoot, as it was quite provocative. With nowhere private to change on the parking lot, and finding it awkward to do so in her car, Michelle opted to quickly change her clothes right there on the street, next to her car, believing she was alone. This decision, unfortunately, likely proved to be a fatal mistake. Jennifer recalled lingering in the parking lot a while longer, chatting with her boyfriend on the phone. As she started to leave, she noticed the headlights of Michelle's Ford Mustang turning on. Believing Michelle was about to follow her, Jennifer felt reassured that her friend was safe. With loud music playing in her car, the last thing Jennifer saw before turning the corner was what she thought was Michelle's Mustang starting to back out. The murder of an aspiring actress that evening, a young security guard named Raymond Lee Jennings was on duty at the park and its attractions. Around 9 o'clock, the 25-year-old heard sounds resembling gunshots emanating from the direction of the parking lot, followed by a car alarm. Lacking a firearm and equipped only with a taser, he hesitated to approach alone, knowing he stood little chance against armed assailants. Jennings promptly called his supervisor, Iris Malone, and reported the incident, also alerting the police. Malone arrived within minutes, so before law enforcement reached the scene, she and Jennings decided to cautiously inspect the situation at the parking lot. They immediately noticed a blue car backed out into the middle lane and halted there with its headlights on and engine running. This was Michelle's Ford Mustang. The car owner was in the driver's seat, motionless and showing no signs of life. Upon closer inspection, Malone and Jennings observed blood inside the car and on Michelle's body, along with several bullet wounds. The driver's door was wide open and the crime scene appeared horrific. It seemed that Michelle had been chased and initially wounded in the parking lot. She had tried to escape, leapt into her car, and even managed to start it. But the assailant caught up to her and fired several more shots, depriving the student of any chance of survival. Michelle's appearance was quite provocative. She had bright makeup and a tousled hairstyle, styled specifically for the video shoot. She was also wearing regular jeans and a shiny top. Apparently, Michelle had partially changed in the parking lot, as a shiny mini-skirt matching the top and a regular t-shirt were found next to her on the passenger seat. One of her shoes was on her foot, while the other lay away on the parking lot, presumably dropped as she dashed to her car. Crime scene investigation following the security guard and his supervisor. The first to arrive at the crime scene was the local sheriff's deputy. He noted that the young woman showed no signs of life, but he informed emergency services in case he was mistaken and she still had a chance of being saved. He also recorded the statements of Jennings and Malone. The arriving police officers began a thorough examination of the crime scene, gathering all possible evidence. They found several shell casings on the parking lot and noticed a bullet mark on the asphalt, slightly away from the car. This led to the conclusion that the perpetrator likely first fired a shot into the ground to intimidate the victim, then shot at her directly, as evidenced by bloodstains on the parking lot. The victim had run towards her car but didn't manage to escape, as the assailant caught up to her and fired several more shots. She died almost instantly from extensive injuries and significant blood loss. In total, 5 shell casings were found on the ground. Experts concluded that all shots were fired from the same weapon, but the bullets significantly differed from each other, raising questions that needed prompt answers. Also found on the ground was an earring, presumably dropped by the victim. Later, her friend identified this item, confirming it belonged to Michelle. However, the second earring was not found on or near the victim. This detail, unfortunately, was initially deemed insignificant and was forgotten for a long time, which turned out to be a crucial oversight. Theories and speculations initially, close relatives and friends of the murdered young woman were interviewed. They unanimously asserted that Michelle had no enemies or ill-wishers. Known for her sociable, open, and very friendly nature, everyone who knew her spoke highly of the student. Thus, a personal motive for the murder was almost immediately ruled out. The next theory considered was an unsuccessful robbery or carjacking attempt of her new vehicle. However, this seemed doubtful. The only personal item missing was her mobile phone, which she had used just minutes before the attack to tell her mother that the filming was over and she was heading back. Michelle's purse, containing her wallet and a couple of $100 in cash, was found at the passenger's feet. Police speculated that, in the confusion and darkness, the assailant might have failed to notice the purse and, fearing the gunshot sounds had attracted security, didn't search the car. This could also explain why the carjacking attempt was aborted. It seemed the attacker initially did not intend to shoot, but only to threaten her with the weapon, but something went wrong. Another theory proposed that Michelle might have been mistaken for a lady of the night due to her appearance. She was dressed provocatively, with heavy makeup and high heels. It was possible the criminal noticed her on her way to the parking lot and followed her. In the darkness, he might have approached her with ill intentions, but upon being firmly rejected, he took her life in retaliation. Supporting this theory was the fact that her top was partially pulled down, exposing her left breast. This suggested that the attacker was likely a man. However, it was also possible that her thin, strapped clothing slipped during the scuffle, chase, or as the frightened, wounded young woman attempted to get into her car. The sole suspect, the first person interrogated, was Raymond, the security guard on duty at the parking lot, who was believed to be the sole witness of the incident. He confirmed hearing gunshots and a car alarm around 9 in the evening, immediately reporting it to his supervisor and calling the police. Raymond noted he saw no one on the parking lot before or after the shots. No one fled or left the scene in the minutes following. Given that the time was still early and the area was popular, it's plausible that others nearby might have seen or heard something. Police became interested in Raymond's background and discovered that, despite his relatively young age, he was the head of a large family, raising 5 children. He served in the California National Guard and aspired to be a law enforcer, working while also studying at the police academy, gaining certain knowledge and skills. As the main witness to the murder, Raymond sought to help the investigation, naively thinking that this experience would be beneficial for his academy exams. When investigators asked him to present his version of events during an interrogation, Raymond detailed his perspective on how things might have unfolded. Being a top student, he meticulously considered all details, trying to piece together a coherent picture. He hypothesized where the attacker and victim might have been during the initial gunshot and how subsequent events unfolded. He based his story on the evidence, the location of shell casings, blood droplets, the victim's belongings, and the car. He also estimated the shooting distances. At that time, Raymond didn't realize that he was unwittingly digging his own grave. He just wanted to assist the investigation and be useful. However, the detectives investigating the case drew their own conclusions, suggesting that such detailed knowledge could only be possessed by the murderer himself. Since there were no other suspects, the security guard was charged with the girl's murder. New witnesses several weeks after Michelle's murder, a 17-year-old African-American girl named Victoria Richardson came to the police's attention. She had been in the parking lot on that tragic evening with her 18-year-old boyfriend and a couple of friends. They had been horseback riding in the park and returned to the parking lot after dark on February 22nd. According to Victoria, they were in their car, music blaring, preparing to leave when they heard unusual sounds. Initially, they mistook them for firecrackers or fireworks, paying little attention, but then realized they were gunshots. Victoria recalled seeing, just a minute and a half earlier, a man in a security guard's uniform walking towards a parked blue Ford Mustang nearby. After the strange sounds and the activation of a car alarm, the friends got out of their car and saw the Mustang, which had rolled backwards and stopped, no longer moving. Reportedly, they saw the security guard again, who warned them of an armed person on the parking lot and advised caution. Hearing this, the group hurried back into their car and cautiously left the parking lot, trying not to draw attention. When asked to describe the guard they interacted with, Victoria mentioned he was a middle-aged, heavy-set African-American man. This description matched another employee who had worked in the parking lot the day before Raymond's shift. This second guard was immediately detained and questioned. He had a solid alibi as he was at a family gathering at the time of the murder, confirmed by about 20 people. Therefore, despite inconsistencies in the witnesses' accounts, Jennings remained the sole suspect. Prolonged investigation and arrest after 5 years, the investigation insisted that Raymond was the killer, partly because his knowledge and skills in forensics could convincingly deflect suspicion away from himself. However, evidence and witness testimonies didn't align coherently. The crime itself appeared irrational and odd, with no apparent motive for the suspect. Raymond had his own legally acquired pistol, which wasn't with him on the night of the murder. He presented this weapon to the police, and forensic analysis confirmed that the bullets weren't fired from it. Investigators speculated that he might have hidden unregistered firearms, but this theory was unsubstantiated. Meanwhile, the murdered girl's parents conducted their own investigation, hiring private detectives. Patricia and Michael felt the law enforcement was inadequately handling the case or simply inactive. They actively engaged in interviews and TV appearances, sharing their story to pressure the authorities. They were convinced that Raymond was responsible for Michelle's death and should be punished. Although there were no strong reasons to detain him initially, Raymond went to Iraq for military service, where he stayed for almost 5 years. Upon returning to the United States, he was immediately arrested and jailed. Raymond consented to a polygraph test but failed, which worked against him. Unable to post the $1 million bail set, he had to remain in custody for about a year while investigators and his defense prepared for trial. Trial and verdict according to the prosecution. The security guard, Raymond, mistook Michelle in her revealing outfit for a sex worker and followed her to her car. After she rebuffed his advances, a scorned Raymond opened fire and then radioed his boss about the incident, stating he wouldn't approach the crime scene. The defense highlighted that the murder weapon was never found, either on the day or later. There were no DNA traces, fingerprints, or any signs of Raymond's presence at the crime scene. Interestingly, epithelial particles under the victim's nails did not match Raymond's DNA. Instead of probing whose DNA it was, the investigators convinced the court it was incidental contamination unrelated to the case. Raymond's personal belongings, car, locker, and home were thoroughly searched for the murder weapon, but a gunpowder residue test on his clothing was strangely not conducted at the time. Notably, Raymond resigned a few days after the incident due to threats from unknown individuals and returned his work uniform, which police received only a week later. It was claimed that he had thoroughly washed the uniform before returning it, thus erasing any gunpowder traces. However, traces of sweat and dust on the uniform indicated it hadn't been washed. Victoria Richardson, the aforementioned witness, testified in court, stating she saw a guard at the parking lot during the shooting. But she didn't specify who she saw, citing darkness and possible confusion. The prosecution seized upon her testimony as evidence of Raymond's guilt. The jury deliberated for a week but couldn't reach a unanimous decision. As a result, a new trial was scheduled to give both sides time to prepare. In February 2009, 11 out of 12 jurors found Raymond guilty of murder. In December 2009, the Supreme Court convicted Raymond Jennings of murder under aggravating circumstances, sentencing him to life imprisonment with the possibility of parole after 40 years. Raymond maintained his innocence, asserting in his final statement that he had no remorse since he didn't commit the crime. However, Michelle's parents and brother were convinced of his guilt and satisfied with the verdict. New trial and acquittal. Raymond Jennings spent nearly 11 years incarcerated, losing hope and justice as his appeals were repeatedly denied. However, in late 2015, renowned attorney Jeffrey Ehrlich and his son Clinton, a law student at the time, took interest in his case. They revisited the case files and found numerous errors, inconsistencies, and blatant violations in the evidence and trial proceedings. The Ehrlichs believed Raymond was wrongfully convicted and set out to prove his innocence. They compiled all evidence and appealed to the department responsible for reviewing convictions. Specifically, they pointed out that Raymond's uniform showed no gunpowder residue or blood splatter, only sweat and dust, indicating it wasn't washed. Additionally, they noted that Raymond was unarmed and detectives failed to consider other individuals present at the park that evening. New reports suggested the murder was a spontaneous act, likely a botched robbery attempt. Moreover, Victoria Richardson, the main witness, and her boyfriend, both with a criminal history, were serving time for armed robbery at the time of the final trial, but were never considered suspects. The mix of different cartridges fired from the same gun, unusual for someone with military training, hinted at a street gang style. Richardson and her boyfriend were part of such a gang, but since they weren't initially investigated for Michelle's murder, many leads were irretrievably lost. Notably, the boyfriend wore an earring resembling the one found at the crime scene on the night of the murder. Despite failing to prove the criminal couple's involvement in the aspiring actress's murder, the Ehrlichs successfully established Jennings' innocence. Consequently, the former guard was factually acquitted, a significant distinction from legal or presumptive innocence. Sergeant Raymond Jennings was released from prison after nearly 11 years for a crime he didn't commit. The judge noted that jurors weren't informed about the presence of gang members at the crime scene that evening. In March 2017, Jennings received a $500,000 compensation for the wrongful conviction. A devout man, He later stated that God had heard his prayers and justice had prevailed. Only Michelle O'Keefe's parents remained deeply upset, believing the man they thought killed their daughter was wrongly freed. Having also lost their son in a car accident, the O'Keefes divorced, clinging to the belief that their daughter's supposed killer had been punished. Despite the case remaining unsolved, the likelihood of anyone being held accountable for Michelle's murder is now extremely low. As the rain falls and the night deepens, thank you for being here with me at Radio Night Crime. True crime stories remind us of life's mysteries and the need to stay aware, even in the stillness of the night. If you enjoyed tonight's story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Let the sound of the rain lull you to sleep, and until next time, stay safe, stay curious, and let the night keep you company.